Willow Abernathy, 34, stood frozen at the entrance of her family's backyard, uninvited to her own parents' 40th anniversary celebration. "We didn't invite you for a reason, Willow," her father's cold voice cut through the sudden silence as guests turned to stare. Her mother's eyes refused to meet hers while her younger sister smirked from behind a champagne flute. Little did they know that their perfect family facade was about to crumble as Willow had finally discovered the truth about the inheritance that had mysteriously vanished 15 years ago. Before we dive into this family betrayal story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe for more shocking family drama stories where karma always comes back around. Trust me, you'll want to see how Willow handles this betrayal. Growing up in suburban Connecticut, Willow Abernathy had always been the responsible one. The straight-A student with a quiet determination that made her parents Richard and Elaine proud, at least on paper. While her younger sister Cassidy was the social butterfly who charmed everyone with her effervescent personality, Willow was the steady rock, the one who helped her mother with dinner and proofread her father's business reports. She'd accepted her role in the family dynamic without question, believing that her parents valued her reliability just as much as they adored Cassidy's vivacity. By 18, Willow had secured a partial scholarship to Columbia University to study finance, her dream school. The remaining tuition was supposed to be covered by the inheritance her grandmother, Margaret, had left specifically for her education. Margaret had always had a special bond with Willow, recognizing a kindred spirit in her eldest granddaughter's analytical mind and quiet ambition. "You're going to do extraordinary things," Margaret had told her during their last visit before she passed. "I've made sure you'll have what you need to soar." But just weeks before Willow was due to start college, her parents sat her down at the kitchen table with solemn expressions. "There's been a problem with Grandma's inheritance," her father explained, his businessman voice firmly in place. "The investments we made with the money, they didn't pan out." The market crashed unexpectedly. Her mother reached across the table, squeezing Willow's hand with practiced sympathy. "We're so sorry, sweetheart. We know how much Columbia meant to you." Willow remembered how her stomach had dropped, how the carefully constructed future she'd planned suddenly collapsed. "All of it?" she'd asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "The entire inheritance is gone, I'm afraid so," her father confirmed. "But the state university has accepted you, and with your scholarship, we can manage the rest. It's not Columbia, but it's still a good school." She'd swallowed her disappointment and nodded, trusting her parents' explanation without question. What other choice did she have? They were her parents. They wouldn't lie to her about something so important. At least that's what she believed at the time. Over the next 15 years, Willow built her life piece by piece. She graduated with honors from the state university, secured an entry-level position at an accounting firm, and slowly worked her way up to become a certified forensic accountant. Her specialty, following money trails and uncovering financial deceptions. The irony wasn't lost on her. Meanwhile, Cassidy floundered from one expensive endeavor to another. A semester at a private arts college in California, a finding herself trip through Europe that stretched into a year, a boutique that opened and closed within 18 months. Through it all, their parents provided a safety net that Willow couldn't help but notice was never extended to her. "Cassidy needs a little extra support," her mother would explain whenever Willow cautiously broached the subject. "She's not as naturally gifted as you are at figuring things out." Willow accepted these explanations too, though they left a bitter taste. She'd learned to be self-sufficient, to take pride in making her own way. But during family gatherings, watching her sister boast about her latest adventure while their parents beamed Willow couldn't help but feel the sting of inequity. The distance between Willow and her family grew gradually but steadily. She stopped coming home for every holiday. Phone calls became shorter, less frequent. Her life in Boston, where she'd relocated for a prestigious position, became her refuge from the persistent feeling that she was somehow less valued than her sister. 3 months ago, while helping her Aunt Clara, her mother's sister, clear out her basement, Willow found an old box of her grandmother's belongings. "Your mom was supposed to give these to you years ago," Clara remarked, frowning slightly. She must have forgotten. Inside was a collection of Margaret's journals, old photographs, and a sealed envelope addressed to Willow in her grandmother's elegant handwriting. The letter inside was dated just weeks before Margaret's death. "My dearest Willow, by the time you read this, I'll be gone, but I want you to know how proud I am of the young woman you've become. Your quiet strength reminds me so much of myself at your age. I've arranged for your education fund to be placed in a dedicated trust with specific instructions that it can only be used for your university expenses. The account contains $175,000, more than enough for Columbia, which I know is your dream. Mr. Peterson at First National has all the details and will help you access the funds when you're ready. Remember, this is your future, no one else's. Don't let anyone convince you to settle for less than what you deserve." All my love, Grandma Margaret Willow had to read the letter 3 times before the implications fully registered. A dedicated trust, specific instructions, $175,000. None of this matched what her parents had told her. None of it. "Did you know about this?" Willow asked her aunt, her voice shaking as she handed over the letter. Clara's expression darkened as she read. "I knew Margaret had set something aside for you, but not the specifics. Richard handled all the arrangements after she passed." She looked up, eyes narrowed. "Willow, are you telling me you never received this money?" That conversation was the first thread that, when pulled, began to unravel the tapestry of lies Willow had been told. With her forensic accounting skills, she began to quietly investigate, requesting old bank records, contacting Mr. Peterson, now retired, but with an excellent memory, and piecing together what actually happened to her inheritance. The truth, when she finally uncovered it, was worse than she could have imagined. Willow sat in her home office, surrounded by financial statements, bank transfers, and notarized documents spread across her desk like puzzle pieces, finally forming a complete picture. Outside, Boston's spring rain pattered against the windows, mirroring the cold reality washing over her. The evidence was irrefutable. 3 months of painstaking investigation had led to one devastating conclusion: her parents had deliberately diverted her inheritance. They hadn't lost the money in bad investments. They had systematically transferred it to accounts that funded Cassidy's education travels and failed business ventures. Willow traced a finger along the paper trail she'd reconstructed. 2 weeks after her grandmother's death, Richard Abernathy had accessed the trust as the executor of Margaret's estate. Within days, the $175,000 had been moved to a different account, one that Willow now knew had financed Cassidy's private arts college tuition the following year. Later transfers aligned perfectly with her sister's extended European trip, the boutique startup costs, and the down payment on her sister's condo. Her grandmother's money, intended specifically for Willow's education, had been deliberately funneled to Cassidy over the years, and her parents had lied to her face about it. The betrayal cut deeper than Willow could have imagined. This wasn't just about the money, although that was significant. This was about 15 years of believing she wasn't worth the investment that her sister automatically received. 15 years of working extra jobs to pay off student loans while watching Cassidy post Instagram photos from Mediterranean beaches. 15 years of her parents gaslighting her whenever she questioned the disparity in how they treated their daughters. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked up her phone and dialed her sister's number. Maybe there was some explanation, some misunderstanding. Maybe Cassidy had been kept in the dark too. "Well, this is a surprise," Cassidy answered, her voice carrying that familiar note of condescension. The prodigal sister calls. "What's up, Willow? Tax season getting to you?" "I need to ask you something," Willow said, struggling to keep her voice steady. Did you know about Grandma Margaret's trust fund for my education? The one that Mom and Dad told me was lost in bad investments? The pause that followed was brief but telling. When Cassidy spoke again, her voice had an edge to it. What are you talking about? That was ages ago. I found Grandma's letter, and I've seen the financial records, Cass. I know the money went to your art school, and your trip to Europe, and your boutique. Another pause, longer this time. Then a sigh. Look, Mom and Dad made those decisions, not me. They thought it was the best use of the money. You were going to be fine, regardless. You've always been the smart one who could take care of herself. I needed the extra help. The casual dismissal in her sister's voice sent a surge of anger through Willow. That wasn't their decision to make. Grandma left that money specifically for my education. Well, what do you expect me to do about it now? It's ancient history, Willow. Always dwelling on the past. This is why nobody wants you around. You're such a downer. Nobody wants me around, Willow repeated, caught off guard by the sudden hostility. God, you're so clueless sometimes. Why do you think you weren't invited to Mom and Dad's anniversary party next weekend? Nobody wants your judgmental attitude ruining the celebration. Willow froze. What anniversary party? Cassidy's laugh was cold. The 40th anniversary party? The one everyone's been planning for months. Oops, guess your invitation got lost in the mail. The sarcasm was unmistakable. Look, just leave it alone, okay? You've built your perfect little life without any help. Good for you. The rest of us normal people sometimes need family support. After Cassidy hung up, Willow sat in stunned silence. Then, with hands that no longer trembled, she opened her laptop and checked her sister's social media accounts. There it was, a countdown post to the anniversary celebration of the century, scheduled for the coming Saturday at her parents' home. Tagged in the photos were cousins, aunts, uncles, family friends, everyone except Willow. The exclusion stung, but it also crystallized something in her mind. They weren't just continuing to favor Cassidy, they were actively cutting Willow out of the family while maintaining their perfect family image to everyone else. She scrolled further and found posts from months back referencing the party planning. Her mother's best friend commenting, "Can't wait to celebrate with you all," her father's golf buddies confirming their attendance, even distant relatives she hadn't seen in years had been invited. Willow closed the laptop and turned back to the stack of financial evidence she'd compiled. The folder contained irrefutable proof that her parents had deliberately diverted funds that were legally intended for her. In some states, what they had done could potentially qualify as fraud or breach of fiduciary duty. For a brief moment, she considered sending the documentation to her parents with a formal legal letter demanding restitution. It would be the sensible approach, the one that matched her methodical nature. But something deeper had broken open inside her. 15 years of suppressed hurt, of being the responsible one who never complained, of watching her sister receive endless support while she struggled alone. The thought of her entire extended family celebrating her parents' marriage while she sat alone in Boston, excluded and forgotten, ignited a fire she couldn't extinguish. She made her decision. She would attend the party uninvited and confront her family with the truth, not just for herself, but for her grandmother, whose wishes had been so callously disregarded. Willow spent the next day organizing the evidence into a clear chronological record that even non-accountants could understand. She booked a flight to Connecticut for Saturday morning and reserved a rental car. As she packed an elegant navy dress, professional yet appropriate for a celebration, she rehearsed what she would say when she faced her family. This wasn't about revenge, she told herself. This was about justice for herself and for the grandmother who had believed in her when no one else had. The Abernathy family home looked exactly as Willow remembered, a stately colonial with perfect landscaping and an air of understated affluence. As she pulled her rental car to the curb, she could see the celebration was in full swing in the backyard. White tents had been erected on the lawn, and the sound of laughter and clinking glasses carried on the early summer breeze. For a moment, doubt crept in. Was she really going to do this? Disrupt her parents' celebration to expose a 15-year-old betrayal, but then she thought of all the birthdays, holidays, and life milestones she'd celebrated alone while her family continued without her. The evidence folder felt heavy in her hands as she walked up the familiar path to the side gate. No one noticed her at first as she slipped into the backyard. Round tables draped in cream linens dotted the lawn, each centered with arrangements of her mother's beloved hydrangeas. A string quartet played softly near the garden, and servers in black and white circulated with trays of hors d'oeuvres and champagne flutes. It was her cousin Emma who spotted her first. Her eyes widened in surprise, then something like guilt flashed across her face. "Willow, I didn't know you were coming." That single comment was enough to draw attention. Heads turned, conversations halted mid-sentence, and a wave of awkward silence spread across the gathering. Through the shifting crowd, Willow saw her parents standing near a table of honor, their expressions morphing from celebratory to shocked as they registered her presence. Richard Abernathy recovered first, excusing himself from the elderly couple he'd been speaking with and crossing the lawn with quick, purposeful strides. Elaine followed a few steps behind, her usual perfect composure noticeably shaken. "Willow," her father said in a low voice when he reached her. "This is a surprise. We didn't expect you." Clearly, Willow replied, keeping her voice steady. "Since I wasn't invited." Her mother glanced nervously at the guests who were pretending not to watch the tense exchange. "This isn't the time or place, dear. Perhaps we can talk later. Call tomorrow?" "No, I don't think so," Willow said louder now. "I've waited 15 years for this conversation. I'm not waiting another day." Richard's face hardened. "We didn't invite you for a reason, Willow. Your attitude has been nothing but negative toward this family for years. We wanted a happy celebration without your issues." The words stung, but Willow had prepared herself for this, the deflection, the blame shifting, classic tactics she'd seen her father use countless times when confronted with uncomfortable truths. "My issues," she repeated, noticing that the party had gone completely silent now. "Let's talk about issues, Dad. Like the issue of what really happened to Grandma Margaret's trust fund." Richard's face paled slightly, but his expression remained stern. "I don't know what you're talking about." "This is hardly the venue for, I know everything," Willow interrupted, her voice carrying across the stunned gathering. "I have the bank records, the transfer documents, everything. You and Mom lied to me about the inheritance being lost. You took the money Grandma explicitly left for my education and gave it to Cassidy instead." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Elaine stepped forward, her carefully applied makeup unable to hide her distress. "Willow, please, let's take this inside." From somewhere in the crowd, Cassidy emerged, champagne flute still in hand. "Oh my God, are you serious right now? You're causing a scene at Mom and Dad's anniversary because of some ancient money drama? This is exactly why you weren't invited." Willow looked from her sister to her parents, then at the uncomfortable faces of relatives and family friends surrounding them. Some looked confused, others embarrassed, and a few like her Aunt Clara appeared genuinely concerned. "You're right," Willow said finally. "This isn't the place. Let's take it inside." The four of them retreated to Richard's study, a wood-paneled room that had always intimidated Willow as a child. As her father closed the door behind them, shutting out the whispers and stares, Willow opened the folder and spread the documents across his desk. "Here's Grandma's letter explicitly stating the money was for my education. She began her forensic accountant training taking over. Here are the bank records showing the $175,000 transfer from the trust to your personal account 2 weeks after she died." And here she laid out more papers in sequence, are the withdrawals that perfectly match Cassidy's art school tuition, her year in Europe, the boutique startup costs, and her condo down payment. Richard and Elaine exchanged glances but said nothing. You told me the money was lost in bad investments. Willow continued, her voice tight with controlled emotion. You watched me work 3 jobs through college to pay tuition. You saw me struggle with student loans for a decade while you funded every one of Cassidy's whims. And all that time you were using the money that Grandma intended for me. We made the decisions we thought were best for the family. Richard finally set his businessman voice firmly in place. Cassidy needed the support more than you did. You were always more capable, more independent. So, I was punished for being responsible, Willow asked incredulously. Grandma's wishes were ignored because you decided I didn't deserve her gift. It wasn't about deserving her mother, interjected, her voice pleading. We knew you'd be successful no matter what. Cassidy needed more guidance, more help to find her path, and that was your decision to make, to completely disregard Grandma's explicit instructions. We're your parents, Richard said firmly. We decided what was best for both our daughters. Cassidy, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. Look, it's not my fault they chose to invest in me instead of you. Maybe if you hadn't been so boring and predictable, they would have found you more worth investing in. The casual cruelty of her sister's words landed like a physical blow. Willow turned to stare at her. Worth investing in, she repeated slowly. Is that how this family works? You invest in the children who entertain you and discard the ones who don't perform for your amusement. That's not fair, her mother protested weakly. No, what's not fair is lying to me for 15 years, Willow shot back. What's not fair is making me believe I wasn't worth the education Grandma wanted me to have. What's not fair is creating this narrative that I somehow deserved less support because I was responsible. You always have to make everything so dramatic, Cassidy sighed, examining her manicure. This is why nobody likes having you around. Everything becomes this big moral crusade with you. This isn't a moral crusade, Cassidy. This is fraud. What they did was illegal. Richard's expression darkened. Are you threatening legal action against your own parents over something that happened years ago? I'm not threatening anything, Willow replied calmly. I'm simply stating facts. You had a fiduciary responsibility as the executor of Grandma's estate to honor her wishes. You violated that responsibility. We gave you everything growing up, her mother said, tears forming in her perfectly made-up eyes. A beautiful home, opportunities, love. How can you reduce our relationship to this? In this financial transaction, I'm not the one who did that, Willow said quietly. You are. When you decided that Grandma's wishes and my future were less important than giving Cassidy whatever she wanted, you defined exactly how much my dreams were worth to you. The room fell silent. Through the window, they could hear the muted sounds of the party continuing, without them awkward conversations, likely speculating about what was happening inside. What do you want, Willow? Her father finally asked, his voice resigned. Money, is that it? You want us to pay you back now after all these years? The question caught her off guard. What did she want? She'd been so focused on uncovering the truth, on confronting them with evidence, that she hadn't fully considered what resolution she was seeking. I want you to acknowledge what you did, she said after a moment. Not just to me, but to everyone out there who thinks we're one big happy family. I want you to stop pretending that I'm the problem when I've been the one lied to and excluded all these years. Richard's jaw tightened. That's ridiculous. We're not going to humiliate ourselves at our own anniversary party. The truth is humiliating to you, Willow asked. Interesting. This is exactly why you weren't invited, Cassidy interjected. You always have to make everything about you. Willow looked at her sister, really looked at her perhaps for the first time in years. The beautiful, charming sister she'd always admired and envied in equal measure now seemed diminished somehow. Her entitlement and casual cruelty weren't attractive qualities. They were the result of years of preferential treatment that had warped her perspective. I didn't make this about me, Willow said quietly. Grandma made it about me when she left that money for my education. You all made it about Cassidy when you decided her wants were more important than my needs and Grandma's wishes." She gathered the documents, returning them neatly to the folder. "I'm done being the family scapegoat. I'm done pretending that the way you've treated me is normal or acceptable. Either you come out there and tell everyone the truth, or I will." Richard and Elaine exchanged glances, a wordless communication born of 40 years of marriage. Whatever silent message passed between them, it resolved into a unified front as Richard straightened his shoulders. "If you insist on creating a scene at our celebration, that's your choice," he said coldly. "But don't expect to be welcomed back into this family afterward." Willow absorbed the threat, the finality of it. For a fleeting moment, she considered backing down, returning to the familiar pattern of acquiescence that had defined her relationship with her family for so long. But something had fundamentally shifted inside her. The evidence folder in her hands contained more than financial documents. It held the truth she'd been denied for 15 years. "I stopped expecting to be truly welcomed in this family a long time ago," she replied, her voice steady despite the emotion threatening to crack it. "The only difference now is that I understand why." She walked out of the study, the rest of her family trailing behind her. The party guests, who had been maintaining a veneer of normal celebration, fell silent again as they emerged. Curious eyes followed Willow as she moved to the center of the gathering. "I apologize for the interruption," she began, her professional voice taking over the same one she used when presenting findings to clients. "Many of you may be wondering why I arrived unexpectedly today. The truth is, I wasn't invited to my own parents' anniversary celebration." Uncomfortable murmurs rippled through the crowd. She could see her father moving to intercept her, but Aunt Clara subtly stepped into his path. "I wasn't invited because I've spent years questioning why my sister received constant financial support from our parents while I was told to make my own way. Today, I finally have answers." She held up the folder briefly. 15 years ago, my grandmother left me an inheritance, specifically for my education at Columbia. My parents told me that money was lost in bad investments, forcing me to attend a state school and work multiple jobs to make ends meet. She paused, letting her gaze sweep across the gathering of family and friends. Some looked away, unable to meet her eyes. Others leaned forward, engrossed in the family drama unfolding before them. The reality, which I've confirmed through bank records and legal documents, is that my parents diverted that inheritance to fund my sister's education, travels, business ventures, and even her condo. They deliberately ignored my grandmother's wishes and lied to me about it for 15 years. "This is inappropriate," Richard finally managed to interject, stepping forward. "Willow is dealing with some personal issues that have led her to misinterpret. I'm a forensic accountant." Dad Willow cut him off calmly. "Tracking financial misconduct is literally my profession. There's no misinterpretation possible when I have the documented evidence of every transfer." A stunned silence fell over the gathering. Then, from the back of the crowd, Aunt Clara spoke up. "I knew Margaret had set up something for you, Willow. She told me she wanted to make sure you could go to Columbia. I always wondered what happened to that money." Another voice joined in, Uncle Robert, her father's brother. "Richard, is this true? You took Willow's inheritance and gave it to Cassidy." Elaine attempted to salvage the situation, her social graces kicking in even as her composure crumbled. "It's a complex family matter that's being oversimplified. We always wanted what was best for both our girls." By stealing from one to give to the other, Clara challenged moving to stand beside Willow. "By lying about it for 15 years? That doesn't sound like wanting the best for both of them." The united front that Richard and Elaine had presented in the study began to fracture under the collective gaze of their friends and family. Cassidy, sensing the shift in the room, suddenly adopted a wounded expression. "I had no idea," she claimed, though her earlier words in the study directly contradicted this. "Mom, Dad, how could you put me in this position?" The transparent attempt to distance herself from any responsibility might have worked in the past, but Willow watched as several relatives exchanged skeptical glances. The family dynamic that had always positioned Cassidy as the golden child and Willow as the difficult one was being reevaluated in real time. "I didn't come here for drama or revenge," Willow said, addressing the gathering once more. "I came because I'm done pretending. Done accepting being treated as less valuable than my sister. Done with the lies that have shaped the last 15 years of my life." She turned to her parents, who stood rigid with embarrassment and anger. "I don't expect you to make amends. I don't even expect you to acknowledge what you did, but I needed to claim my truth. If not for myself, then for Grandma Margaret, whose wishes you disregarded so completely." With that, she turned to leave her message delivered. To her surprise, Aunt Clara fell into step beside her. "I'm coming with you," her aunt said firmly. "We have a lot to catch up on." As they walked toward the gate, Willow heard the murmurs behind them explode into open discussion. She'd exposed the truth, and now the carefully maintained family narrative was unraveling in her wake. In her car with Clara beside her, Willow finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of what had just happened. Her hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel. "You did the right thing," Clara said, her voice gentle but firm. "Margaret would have been proud of you." The validation, so simple yet so profound, broke through the last of Willow's composure. Tears flowed freely as 15 years of suppressed hurt, confusion, and anger finally found release. The weeks that followed were a strange mixture of grief and liberation. Willow returned to Boston and threw herself into her work, processing the seismic shift in her family relationships through the familiar comfort of numbers and financial analyses. She didn't block her family's numbers, but she didn't reach out either. The first text came from her cousin Emma, 3 days after the party. "I had no idea, Willow. I'm so sorry for not seeing it. Can we talk sometime?" More messages followed from Uncle Robert, from her mother's college roommate, who had always treated Willow with particular kindness, from cousins who had witnessed the favoritism over the years, but never understood its extent. Each message reinforced what Willow was slowly coming to accept. She wasn't crazy or oversensitive. Others had seen the disparity in how she was treated. They just hadn't known the full story. Her parents' response was predictable. Richard sent a terse email a week after the party. "Your behavior was inexcusable. You humiliated your mother and me in front of our friends and family over ancient history that you've clearly misconstrued. Until you're ready to apologize and discuss this rationally, we have nothing more to say to each other." No denial of the financial evidence, no acknowledgement of the lies, just anger that she had exposed them. Cassidy's approach was more insidious. She launched what could only be described as a social media campaign, posting throwback family photos with captions that subtly painted Willow as mentally unstable, thinking about simpler times before adult pressures and stress took their toll on our family. Number, mental health, number, family first. Sometimes the people who seem strongest are fighting the hardest battles in their minds, sending healing thoughts to those who need it. Number, compassion. The calculated manipulation might have worked years ago, but Willow found herself strangely unmoved by her sister's attempts to control the narrative. She hadn't posted about the confrontation online. She didn't need to. The truth had already spread through the family grapevine, and Cassidy's performative concern was being met with increasing skepticism from relatives who had witnessed the party showdown. 4 weeks after the party, Willow consulted with a lawyer about potentially recovering the stolen inheritance. The attorney confirmed that while there might be legal grounds for a case, the statute of limitations complicated matters and litigation would be expensive and emotionally draining. The question you need to ask yourself, the lawyer advised, is what outcome would bring you peace? Is it the money itself? Justice, public vindication? Or is it simply the acknowledgement of the wrong that was done to you? The question lingered, with Willow long after the consultation. What did she truly want? The inheritance itself, while substantial, wasn't life-changing money for her now. She'd built a successful career despite being denied the opportunity to attend her dream school. The financial impact of her parents' deception, while real, wasn't what hurt the most. What hurt was the years of believing she wasn't worthy of the same support her sister received. The gaslighting, the exclusion from family events. The narrative that cast her as difficult or oversensitive whenever she questioned the disparity in treatment. Healing Willow decided wouldn't come from a court-ordered financial settlement. It would come from maintaining the boundaries she had finally established, from no longer participating in the family dynamic that had diminished her for so long. She called the lawyer and declined to pursue legal action. Instead, she focused on strengthening the genuine connections that had emerged from the confrontation. Regular calls with Aunt Clara, coffee with Emma when she visited Boston, a surprising friendship with her father's cousin who had quietly supported her education with small checks when she was in college. I still can't believe what happened next in this story. Family betrayal cuts deeper than any other kind, doesn't it? If you're feeling the tension right now, tap that like button and subscribe to see how Willow turns this situation around. Have you ever had to stand up to family who wronged you? Let me know in the comments while I continue with what Willow did after being publicly humiliated. 6 months after the anniversary party confrontation, Willow's life had settled into a new normal. Her career was thriving. She'd been promoted to senior forensic accountant at her firm and was developing a reputation for handling particularly complex cases with both technical precision and emotional intelligence. The latter, she sometimes reflected wryly, was a skill honed through years of navigating her family's dynamics. Her personal healing journey had progressed too. Weekly therapy sessions helped her process the decades of emotional manipulation she'd endured. She'd developed new friendships in Boston, joined a rock climbing gym, and even started dating again after a long period of focusing solely on her career. For perhaps the first time in her adult life, Willow felt genuinely at peace with herself. The sporadic updates from the extended family grapevine brought news she observed with detached interest. Her parents were facing financial difficulties. Richard's investment firm had taken some significant losses, and their lavish lifestyle was beginning to show cracks. They'd canceled their annual winter trip to the Bahamas, a tradition they'd maintained even during the 2008 recession. The country club membership had been quietly downgraded. Cassidy predictably was struggling with this new reality. After years of unlimited financial support, she was encountering resistance when she approached their parents for money. Her latest venture, an online lifestyle coaching business, was failing to gain traction, and for the first time, Richard and Elaine were suggesting she figure it out on her own. "Isn't that ironic?" Aunt Clara remarked during one of their weekly phone calls. All these years later, they're finally telling Cassidy what they told you at 18. Willow made non-committal responses to these updates. She didn't wish financial hardship on her family, but she couldn't deny feeling a certain poetic justice in their current struggles. They were experiencing, perhaps for the first time, the uncertainty she'd lived with while putting herself through college. Then came the call that changed everything. Is this Willow Abernathy? The male voice on the other end of the line was vaguely familiar, but difficult to place. Yes, this is she. How can I help you? This is James Westfield. I was your father's business partner. Willow sat up straighter in her office chair. James Westfield had been a fixture at her parents' home during her childhood, a jovial man with a booming laugh who always brought the best Christmas presents. She hadn't seen him in years. "Mr. Westfield, hello. This is unexpected. I'm sorry to call out of the blue like this, but I'm in a difficult position." He paused, then continued with evident discomfort. "I understand there's been some family tension recently. Clara mentioned what happened at the anniversary party." Willow waited, unsure where this conversation was heading. The thing is, Willow, I've discovered some concerning irregularities in the firm's accounts. Transactions that don't add up. Client funds that have been moved in ways that violate our fiduciary responsibility. A cold feeling settled in Willow's stomach. Are you suggesting my father is mismanaging company funds? Not just mismanaging. I believe he's been using client investments to cover personal financial losses. It started small, but it's escalated over the past year as their financial situation has deteriorated. Willow closed her eyes briefly, processing this new information. Why are you telling me this, Mr. Westfield? Because you're a forensic accountant. Because you've already shown the courage to confront difficult truths about your family. And because there are innocent clients who trust us with their retirement funds, employees whose livelihoods depend on the firm, who will be hurt if this continues. The request was implicit but clear. He wanted her help investigating her own father. The irony wasn't lost on Willow being asked to use her professional skills to uncover yet another financial deception perpetrated by Richard Abernathy. I need to think about this, she said finally. This is complicated. I understand, but please don't take too long. The situation is deteriorating quickly. After the call, Willow sat motionless at her desk, staring out the window at Boston's skyline. The ethical dilemma before her was unprecedented. On one hand, she had professional obligations and moral considerations. If her father was misappropriating client funds, people could lose their life savings. On the other hand, actively participating in an investigation that could lead to her father's financial ruin and possible criminal charges felt like crossing a line from setting boundaries to seeking revenge. Would helping James be justice? Or would it be vindictiveness disguised as righteousness? For 3 days, Willow wrestled with the question. She consulted her therapist, who reminded her that her responsibility was to her own integrity, not to protecting those who had harmed her. She spoke hypothetically with a colleague who specialized in financial crimes, gaining insight into the potential scope of what her father might be doing. In the end, her decision crystallized around a simple truth. This wasn't about her family drama. It was about protecting innocent people from fraud. If she had discovered similar evidence about any other financial advisor, she wouldn't hesitate to act. Why should her father be any different? She called James back and arranged to review the documentation he'd gathered, but with a condition. Her involvement would remain anonymous. She would analyze the records and provide guidance on next steps, but her name would be kept out of any official proceedings. Not to protect her father, but to protect herself from becoming entangled in another painful family controversy. The evidence James provided was damning. Richard had indeed been transferring client funds to cover personal expenses and losses, using increasingly complex methods to disguise the transactions. What had started as borrowing with the intention of replacing the money had evolved into a full-blown Ponzi scheme as his financial situation worsened. Willow created a careful strategy that would expose the financial misconduct without revealing her involvement. She outlined exactly which regulatory bodies should be notified, which documents provided the clearest evidence, and how to structure the complaint for maximum impact. James would be the whistleblower. She would be the anonymous expert who guided him. While immersed in this work, Willow received an unexpected email from a name she didn't recognize: Harold Peterson. The subject line, "Margaret Abernathy Trust, important information," sent a jolt through her. Mr. Peterson, her grandmother's former attorney, had read about the Abernathy Investment Group's financial troubles in the business section of the Connecticut newspaper. The article had jogged his memory about an old matter he'd never fully resolved, a second trust that Margaret had established for Willow that was separate from the education fund. "Your grandmother was a remarkably astute woman," the elderly lawyer wrote. "She created 2 distinct trusts for you. The first, which your father accessed as executor, was specifically for your education. But there was a second trust with more substantial assets that was structured to mature on your 35th birthday with the explicit condition that only you could be notified of its existence. I was supposed to contact you directly when the time came. Peterson explained that health issues had forced his early retirement several years ago, and in the confusion of transferring his cases to colleagues, the reminder about Willow's second trust had been misplaced. It was only the newspaper article about her father's business troubles that had triggered his memory. The second trust contains your grandmother's investment portfolio, which has grown considerably over the years, Peterson continued. Based on the most recent valuation, the assets are now worth approximately $1.2 million. As you'll be turning 35 inches 3 months, I wanted to ensure you were aware of this inheritance, which your father has no legal access to or control over. Willow read the email 3 times, emotions swirling too chaotically to name. Her grandmother, wise, foresighted Margaret, had anticipated the possibility that Richard might interfere with her wishes. She had created a backup plan to ensure that Willow would eventually receive the support she intended, regardless of her father's actions. The timing was almost eerie, discovering this second inheritance just as she was helping to expose her father's financial misconduct. It wasn't revenge. It was something far more profound. It was the universe, or perhaps the lingering influence of her grandmother, restoring balance to a situation that had been unbalanced for too long. Willow scheduled a meeting with Peterson for the following week. Then, with a strange sense of calm, she returned to the task of analyzing her father's financial deceptions, not with anger now, but with the detached precision that made her excellent at her job. Justice, she reflected sometimes, arrived on its own schedule. All you had to do was clear the path for it. The story broke on a Tuesday morning. Abernathy Investment Group under investigation for financial irregularities. Read the headline in the business section of the Hartford Courant. By Wednesday, it had been picked up by larger outlets, and by Thursday, the Connecticut State Banking Department had announced a formal investigation into Richard's firm. Willow watched the situation unfold from the relative sanctuary of her Boston apartment, her name nowhere to be found in any of the reporting. James Westfield was identified as the whistleblower who had brought concerning evidence to regulators, while she remained the anonymous expert who had helped structure the case. The first call came from Cassidy of all people on Friday evening. "Have you seen the news?" her sister demanded without preamble when Willow answered. "About Dad's company, I've seen some headlines," Willow replied neutrally. "It sounds serious." "It's a disaster." Cassidy's voice cracked with what sounded like genuine distress. "They've frozen all the company assets pending investigation. Dad's a wreck. Mom won't stop crying. And now they're saying they can't help me with rent this month." The unspoken request hung in the air between them. Willow let the silence stretch, waiting for her sister to actually articulate what she wanted. "I was thinking," Cassidy finally continued, her voice taking on the wheedling tone Willow remembered from childhood, requests for homework, help, or clothing loans, "since you're doing so well with your career and everything. Maybe you could help me out, just until this misunderstanding with Dad's company gets sorted out." Willow closed her eyes, counting silently to 10. "This isn't a misunderstanding, Cassidy. From what I've read, there are serious allegations of financial misconduct." "That's ridiculous. Dad would never do anything illegal. Someone's obviously got it in for him, probably that jealous partner of his. James always resented Dad's success." It was fascinating in a clinical sort of way to observe how quickly Cassidy constructed a narrative that absolved their father of any wrongdoing. The pattern was so familiar when faced with uncomfortable truths about their family deny and deflect. "Regardless of what happened," Willow said carefully, "I'm not in a position to bail you out financially. I have my own expenses and financial goals." "Are you serious?" Cassidy's tone shifted from pleading to indignant. After everything this family has done for you, the statement was so breathtakingly lacking in self-awareness that Willow almost laughed. Everything the family has done for me, like diverting my inheritance, excluding me from family events, gaslighting me for years when I questioned the obvious favoritism. God, are you still hung up on that? It was 15 years ago, Willow. Get over it already. I have gotten over it. That's why I'm not giving you money. I've moved on from trying to win approval from a family that never valued me equally. After ending the call with her sister, Willow wasn't surprised when her parents reached out next. First came a stiffly formal email from her father mentioning recent business challenges and inquiring about her well-being in a transparent prelude to asking for financial assistance. When she didn't respond, her mother called alternating between tearful reminiscences about Willow's childhood and vague allusions to the family's current difficulties. Willow listened but made no commitments. The performance was so predictable it almost seemed scripted. When all other resources were exhausted, they finally turned to the daughter they had marginalized for years, expecting her to set aside past hurts and come to their rescue. 2 weeks later, Mr. Peterson confirmed that Willow's second inheritance was being processed and would be available to her on her upcoming birthday. When the news inevitably filtered through the family grapevine that Willow was about to receive a substantial inheritance, the outreach from her parents intensified. Richard's emails became more direct, acknowledging past misunderstandings and suggesting they meet to clear the air. Elaine began calling daily her messages, increasingly desperate as the investigation into her husband's business practices progressed. Finally, Willow agreed to a meeting not out of obligation, but because she recognized an opportunity for the closure she hadn't fully achieved at the anniversary party confrontation. This time, she would be meeting them from a position of financial security and emotional strength, not as the hurt daughter seeking acknowledgement of past wrongs. They arranged to meet at a neutral location, a quiet restaurant in Hartford, halfway between Boston and her parents' home. Willow arrived first, selecting a table in the corner that offered privacy for what would likely be a tense conversation. Her parents entered 10 minutes late, both looking noticeably aged since she'd last seen them 6 months ago. Richard's confident posture had given way to a slight stoop, while Elaine's carefully maintained appearance showed signs of neglect. Her roots needed touching up, and her typically immaculate manicure was chipped. Willow, her father, began after they were seated, attempting to project his usual authoritative tone despite the circumstances. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us." "Of course," she replied evenly. "What did you want to discuss?" The directness of her questions seemed to throw him off script. He glanced at Elaine, who jumped in with practiced social grace. "We've missed you, darling. These past months have been so difficult without you in our lives. And with everything that's happening now." Her voice trailed off meaningfully. Willow waited, sipping her water, forcing them to articulate exactly why they had requested this meeting. Richard cleared his throat. "I assume you've heard about the situation with my firm." Completely unfounded allegations, of course, but these investigations can drag on for months, freezing assets and damaging reputations in the meantime. "I've read the reports," Willow acknowledged. "They seem quite detailed." Her father's expression tightened. Westfield always was meticulous with his record-keeping. A shame he's using that skill to stab me in the back now. The deflection was so predictable that Willow almost felt a twinge of pity. Even now, facing potential criminal charges, Richard couldn't acknowledge his own culpability. "We also understand," Elaine interjected, reaching across the table as if to take Willow's hand, before thinking better of it, "that you've recently come into an inheritance from your grandmother. A second trust that we weren't aware of." And there it was, the real reason for this reconciliation attempt. "Yes," Willow confirmed. "Grandma Margaret set up 2 trusts for me." the education trust which you diverted to Cassidy, and a second investment trust that matures on my 35th birthday next month. Your grandmother always did favor you, Richard remarked, a hint of bitterness creeping into his tone. She never understood that Cassidy had different needs, different challenges. Willow raised an eyebrow. So, diverting my education fund was what correcting Grandma's favoritism, balancing the scales. We did what we thought was best for both our daughters, Elaine insisted, tears welling in her eyes. Maybe we made mistakes, but our intentions were good. And now you're here because... Willow prompted, refusing to let them continue the evasion. Richard sighed heavily, the facade of confidence finally cracking. We're in trouble, Willow. Serious trouble. The investigation, the frozen assets, we could lose everything. The house, our retirement, savings, everything we've worked for. What exactly are you asking me for? A loan, her father said, the word clearly difficult for him to articulate. From your inheritance. Just until this misunderstanding is cleared up and my assets are released. Willow studied them both, these people who had shaped her childhood, who had dismissed her dreams, diverted her inheritance, and excluded her from family gatherings. They had never apologized for any of it. Even now, they characterized the diversion of her education fund as a well-intentioned mistake rather than the deliberate betrayal it was. And yet, sitting across from them in their diminished state, Willow felt no satisfaction. No vindictive joy at seeing them brought low. Only a profound sadness for the relationship that could have been, and a quiet certainty about the boundaries she needed to maintain. No, she said simply. I won't be providing a loan. Richard's face flushed with anger. After everything we've done for you. That's just it, Dad Willow interrupted calmly. What exactly have you done for me? You took my education fund. You consistently favored Cassidy. You excluded me from family events. You dismissed my concerns for years. You only reached out now because you need something from me. That's not fair, Elaine protested weakly. It's entirely fair, Willow countered, and it's the truth. I won't give you money to cover up financial mismanagement or to maintain a lifestyle built on taking from others, whether it was taking from me or from your clients. Richard pushed back from the table, his expression thunderous. So this is your revenge, watching your family suffer when you have the means to help. This isn't revenge, Willow said, maintaining her composure. This is a natural consequence of your own actions. I didn't cause your current situation. I'm simply declining to rescue you from it. As her parents left the restaurant, Richard, stormy, Elaine, tearful Willow remained seated finishing her meal in solitude. She had expected to feel conflicted after denying their request for help. Instead, she felt a profound sense of peace. For the first time in her adult life, she had set a boundary with her family and held firm without guilt or self-doubt. The following weeks brought a cascade of developments. Richard's legal troubles mounted as the investigation uncovered the full extent of his financial misconduct. Several clients came forward with their own complaints, and rumors circulated that criminal charges were forthcoming. Cassidy, faced with the reality that her parents could no longer support her lifestyle, took to social media with increasingly desperate posts about family loyalty and standing together in difficult times. Meanwhile, extended family members who had witnessed the anniversary party confrontation began to connect the dots between Richard's current financial misdeeds and his past treatment of Willow. The narrative that had always cast Willow as difficult or oversensitive was giving way to a new understanding. Perhaps she had simply been the only one willing to call out problematic behavior that others had enabled through their silence. On her 35th birthday, Willow received access to Margaret's investment trust. True to Mr. Peterson's estimate, it had grown to just over $1.2 million through careful management. The inheritance represented not just financial security, but validation proof that her grandmother had valued her and had taken extraordinary steps to ensure that at least part of her legacy would reach the granddaughter she had so loved. After careful consideration, Willow decided to use a portion of the inheritance to establish a small fund for the employees of her father's firm, who were losing their jobs as the company collapsed. It wasn't their fault that Richard had mismanaged client funds, and many of them had families to support. The gesture wasn't about salvaging her father's reputation or absolving him of responsibility. It was about Willow expressing her own values through action. When news of this reached her father, he called it a PR stunt aimed at humiliating him further. Willow let the accusation roll off her like water. She knew her own intentions, and for the first time in her life, she didn't need her family's approval or understanding. The final piece fell into place when her father was formally charged with securities fraud, wire fraud, and breaching fiduciary duty. As she watched the news report, Willow felt a complex mixture of emotions: sadness for what could have been relief, that justice was being served, and a quiet determination to move forward with her own life, unburdened by the toxic family dynamics that had constrained her for so long. 1 year later, Willow stood on the balcony of her new Cambridge apartment, watching the Charles River flow beneath a crisp autumn sky. So much had changed in the 12 months since her confrontation with her parents and the subsequent unraveling of her family's facade. Her father had reached a plea agreement with prosecutors, avoiding a lengthy prison sentence but accepting substantial fines and a lifetime ban from the securities industry. Her mother had downsized to a modest condo, selling the family home to cover legal fees and restitution to clients. Cassidy, after a brief period of very public struggle, had finally found steady employment as an event coordinator, a role that utilized her social skills without requiring the financial acumen she had never developed. Willow maintained selective contact with certain family members on her own terms. Aunt Clara remained a steadfast presence in her life. Several cousins who had reached out after the anniversary party had evolved into genuine friends rather than obligatory relatives. She exchanged occasional texts with her mother, though they had yet to rebuild anything resembling a close relationship. With her father and Cassidy, she maintained firm boundaries, responding to direct messages, but declining invitations that seemed designed to pull her back into old patterns. Her therapist called this compassionate detachment, and it felt right to Willow acknowledging their place in her history without allowing them to dictate her present or future. The Margaret Abernathy Education Fund, which Willow had established with a significant portion of her inheritance, had already awarded its first scholarships to young women pursuing degrees in finance and accounting. The Foundation's mission statement, crafted with care, spoke of breaking cycles of financial dependency and empowering women to create their own security values that Margaret had tried to instill in her granddaughter and that Willow was now extending to others. Professionally, Willow had made a bold change, leaving her firm to start her own practice, specializing in helping individuals identify and address financial abuse within families and relationships. Her personal experience combined with her technical expertise gave her unique insight into these complex situations. The work was both challenging and deeply fulfilling. As she sipped her morning coffee, watching rowers glide across the river's surface, Willow reflected on the journey of the past year, how the painful confrontation with her family's deception had ultimately led to a life more authentic and aligned with her values than she could have imagined. The family she had now was chosen not obligatory people who valued her for exactly who she was, not what she could provide or how well she performed prescribed roles. The inheritance that had been denied her had ultimately led to an even greater legacy, one that would help others avoid the financial manipulation she had experienced. Sometimes Willow realized the family you choose is indeed more important than the family you're born into. And sometimes setting boundaries that seem painful in the moment is exactly what creates space for genuine peace and fulfillment to take root. Have you ever experienced a family betrayal that taught you valuable life lessons? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of justice and personal growth resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to my channel for more authentic family drama stories, and share with someone who might need to hear this message. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Remember, sometimes the hardest boundaries to set are the ones that ultimately set you free.